First off, tariffs and how they are affecting the USA bicycle industry or the bicycle industry as a whole. The source for this one is peopleforbikes.org. Bikes avoid new steel and aluminum tariffs. So that's the first takeaway. Bikes themselves are not being subjected to tariffs under the current iteration of tariffs. So the good news for the bicycle industry, and I will have the link for this story in the show notes. Essentially, bicycles, electric bikes, frames, forks, bicycle components, they are not part of the tariffs related to steel or aluminum at this time. So I assume that applies to China. I assume that applies to Mexico. I assume that applies to Canada. I'm not pretending to be an expert here. Feel free to visit this link and get more in-depth information. The bad news on this one, though, and this Brad and I on an episode previously when we were talking about tariffs touched on this a little bit. The imported steel and aluminum used by domestic manufacturers built in the USA bikes, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know is there a major builder that's building in the United? I think it's mostly boutique-ish, custom, semi-custom type things. I could be wrong. Feel free to let me know, shiftlesslive@gmail.com. But domestic manufacturers are subject to the tariffs themselves when they're bringing in the steel to build bikes, essentially. Aluminum is being increased from 10% to 25%. And yeah, that includes coming from Canada. Aluminum and steel, if there's a domestic USA bike builder that's bringing in the steel tubing, the aluminum, things like that, they will be paying the tariffs. And that means made in the USA bicycles will be even more expensive, but the tariffs don't affect the imported bicycles and frames and things like that. Evidently, the components, it's a wash. A bike builder in the United States that's building custom bikes or whatever else, they're bringing in their components. The components themselves aren't subject to the tariffs, but that also applies to the imported bikes and frames as well. So that's a quick takeaway there. Obviously, this is for lack of a better term, a fluid situation. Nobody knows exactly what's going on with these tariffs yet and how things may or may not change. I know a lot of people, their first takeaway is that tariffs are going to be very beneficial to United States companies to be able to compete with imported goods. In this particular case, it doesn't look like that's the current situation, but we'll see how that evolves going forward. I would definitely like to speak with a built in the USA bicycle manufacturer. So if anybody out there listening has some truly relevant opinions and practical application of this information, I would love to hear about it. So feel free to reach out and touch us